Thank you and welcome everybody. We usually show recent acquisitions at these sort of gatherings, and two of the items are not that recent, although one was only discovered recently. The Bodleian doesn't give up its secrets easily. But this first item is a Marsh manuscript. So Archbishop Narcissus Marsh, who was the primate of all Ireland in the late 17th, early 18th century. He died in 1714 and his manuscripts came in shortly afterwards as a bequest. They, in turn, most of them had been acquired at the sale of Jacobus Golius, who was the late 17th century, probably the greatest Orientalist in all Europe at the time. He was Dutch. And Marsh sent Edward Bernard, who was an Oxford scholar, to Leiden to buy the Golius manuscripts, and ended up with about 75% of them, which we have now. And the remainder of Golius's collection is still in Leiden University as well. So, but this is a Marsh manuscript, MS Marsh 178, and I wanted to show this to you just as a reference point because it's an example of an early manuscript in Arabic. It's a Quranic manuscript on vellum, parchment, and it is in Kufic script. And Kufic script developed quite early. It's not the oldest Arabic script, but it's related to the city of Kufa in Iraq, which was founded in about 638, 639, so very early on, and became an intellectual and political hub. And this script style is said to have developed in the Kufic environment, and it's very angular, not too many curved lines, and equally suited for inscriptions on stone as well. And this item is probably 8th or 9th century, so not the earliest form, but a bit of a more developed form of Kufic. It has five lines per page, and it's only a portion that we have here. Much of it is lost, although we do know that it's spread through several libraries in Europe and the Middle East. Fragments of it are anyway. We have a lovely example of a chapter heading here in gold and a floreate design. These are quite unusual because they're mostly hidden away in private collections, these chapter headings. So this was just a reference point, so you can have a look at the script and compare it to this script here, which is an example of Neo-Kufic, which is a script style for the Qur'an again, which developed in the 10th century in the Eastern Islamic Empire, so Khorasan and Central Asia. And Ibn Nadim, who wrote his catalogue of books in the mid-10th century, mentions this script style as being a new phenomenon in his time, and calls it piramuz, which is a Persian term, which means the script that can be taught to old men, I think, or taught by old men, I'm not quite sure which. Anyway, if you compare the two scripts, you can see they're similar, but this is more of a transitional script towards the newer, rounder scripts which came in into the fore in the 11th century. And this particular book was acquired in 1925, but it's been hidden away for nearly 100 years because it was transferred to another shelf mark, and and it was only Chris Fletcher, who sadly can't be with us today, who discovered a reference to it in the Friends of the Bodleian newsletter, and we had to run around trying to find references to it in hand lists, and eventually Ale, who's here today, found a reference, yes, and we were able to locate it, and it turned out to be this complete and perfect copy of the Qur'an in the new style Neo-Kufic script. And
what is that phone number?
It's MS Don D2.
Thank you.
Yes, it's a lovely copy. Have headings in gold. There's one here, and verse markers and 10 verse markers, 5 verse markers. And when you get to the end, you see the shorter surahs or chapters of the Quran. So you can see more chapter headings there. Now we get to the new acquisition, which was only acquired at auction a few months ago, and it's quite an unusual item. There's a long tradition of embroidery in the Islamic world, and the most famous example of that is probably the kiswa, or the complete covering of the Kaaba at Mecca, the temple in Mecca. Every year, the black cloth that covers this large cubic building is made in, it used to be made in Egypt, but now I think it's made in the Gulf, and it's a black cloth with gold embroidery done with machine these days, but it used to be done with hand in Ottoman times. But this is a portion of the Quran, and it's bead embroidery. We thought it was normal embroidery, but it's actually beads. So strung, very small beads strung on string and on paper with a linen backing. And it's probably a pious act of devotion by somebody who painstakingly strung these together to form the words. And they've made quite a good rendition of the typical Naskhi script. And also there's a surah heading here, a chapter heading in blue beads, so that the main text is in green beads, but the surah heading is in blue beads, and it looks like it's emulating the Thuluth script, which is usually used for surah headings. We don't know whether it's part of a whole Quran done in this manner, which would have been a momentous task. I think somebody who embroidered a Quran in the Gulf recently took about 8 years to do it, by machine as well. So, I mean, one would think that if you were going to do an embroidered part of the Quran, you would do the 30th juz, or 30th portion. But this is from a different portion, so I can't quite work it out. It's from the sort of towards the end of the Quran, but not the very end. So it may have been a joint effort, and people collaborated on it, or it could have been an individual pious act of devotion. And feel free to come and have a look at the beadwork and the little floral patterns in the corners, the gold trim, and the different coloured beads.